Hi, my name is Judith and I grew up homeless. It's not the most interesting thing about me, but it's definitely something that has shaped who I am. I am no longer homeless, but I was for 5 years during my childhood. So I just thought to share that experience of being homeless as a native New Yorker in New York City and being homeless as a child. I wasn't born into homelessness, it kind of just happened. So I'm adopted by my grandparents, and everything was fine for the first few years of my life. Both of my grandparents were healthy, and we were just living a normal life. But that all kind of changed when my papa got kidney failure and it was really bad. So eventually we moved into an apartment with him in Brooklyn that was convenient for where he was going for dialysis and everything. And it was one of those apartments that were income based or for people who had disabilities. So at the time, my papa, being as sick as he was, qualified for all of this, and we just moved in because my mom was his main caregiver. So he would spend a lot of hours in dialysis and then come home at night, and my mom would, of course, have dinner for him, take care of him, and always help out. And around that time also, we weren't homeless, but we didn't have a really big income source. My mom wasn't working and my papa wasn't really working either because he was spending most of his time getting treatment. So we were very careful about our spending, and we often went to like soup kitchens to have like meals after school. I very specifically remember my mom taking me to St. John's Bread and Life, which is a church, but many churches do like food pantry and like clothing drives, soup kitchens. So I remember going to St. John's with my mom regularly for soup kitchen, and they also had like a library for children where we could like take books. And my mom got a counselor there to kind of help with other resources. So it was really nice. I remember having lots of clothes from there, from their clothing drives, but we weren't like super dependent on it. It was a resource that we used because we definitely needed it, but it wasn't something that we heavily relied on. But that changed after we became homeless. So my papa had lots of health struggles with, like, as I grew up, and there was a few like really big scary incidents. Like one time my mom and I came home and he had already been home, and I was super excited to see him. So I like ran, papa, just jump on him while he was sitting on the couch, and his like catheter flew off and then there was blood everywhere. It was a scene. I had to call 911, and that was a regular thing for me. Like calling 911 for his medical emergencies, like having seizures and stuff like that, were super regular for little 5-6-year-old me. And it really, it taught me a lot about, staying calm in high pressure situations, and just like, the reality of life and health and all of that. One day he had a heart attack on his way to dialysis, and he passed away in the hospital that night. I remember my mom being shattered, and just the house was quiet and things were weird, and we were just trying to find a new normal after his passing, because of course when someone passes away, everyone's supportive for that first week, everyone's there for you, but then like after the funeral, it's like everyone just disappears and no one follows up consistently anymore, and they act like everyone can just go back to normal, but you're still there. You're still in that situation. You were the one who saw that person every single day, and I feel like that makes a hell of a difference. A few months pass, and my mom and I are still trying to figure things out, learning this new normal, and just my mom is learning to be a single mom now, like completely single. Not that she wasn't basically before, if you think about it. My papa passed away 1 week before my 7th birthday. So I was 6 years old, almost 7, and it was 2004. And so I was really young and still trying to understand death, and I didn't understand why my mom was like this new, different person. Just trying to figure out life because it's hard understanding it all when you're just like 6, 7. But anyways, I remember one day my mom and I were coming home from school, and we're walking up to our door and we see some man like messing with the door. My mom's like, what's going on? What's going on? You know, of course, hitting him with all the questions. What are you doing? And he basically was like, you know, I gotta kick you guys out, like, because since a person with a disability was no longer living there, we didn't have the right to live there any longer. And he was basically kicking us out. All of our stuff was inside. And I remember my mom begging, just like pleading with this man, please just give us one more night. Just give us some time to like get our stuff. And this man found it in his heart, or whatever it was. He said, okay, until tomorrow. And I remember the look on my mom's face, you know, just knowing what was to come. And what was I supposed to think what was going to happen? Like, I'm seeing someone kick us out of our apartment. Now what? Like, I'm 7. But anyways, we get back into the apartment. We know that we have about just tonight to get it all together and get out. So my mom packs everything. We basically say goodbye to everything, to our apartment, to all of our comforts, everything we have. We pack up one single shopping cart of stuff in a 1-bedroom apartment that we were staying at. And it was a big 1-bedroom because, you know, Brooklyn in early 2000s. But it was a big, beautiful 1-bedroom, and we pack up all our stuff and we go to a shelter in the Bronx. And obviously when you go to the shelter, it's kind of like a holding spot before they can place you into a more permanent spot. And this was basically the start of me being homeless. So we spend about 2 days in that place. It was like we got there late at night. We slept there overnight, and sleeping there, you know, we were sleeping on the floor. My mom put me in like a baby crib, even though I was too old. She kind of just had me laying there, and she would like try to cover me with like a blanket, but like the people who were working there were like, you can't cover your child with a blanket, like take the blanket off of her. I don't even understand. But and then we were there the whole next day into part of the night. And then I remember it was really late, maybe like 1 a.m. Of that second night that we were gonna be there. And it's just kind of just like a waiting room. So you're just like with a whole bunch of other people packed. But around that night, then they transferred us to our first shelter. Now, I want to just put out there that I know the shelter system, at least in New York, prioritizes women and children. So if you are a single woman or a single man, you can expect to wait way longer and be put into a place that is communal. So you don't actually get like a private room. You just get like a communal space until you can find somewhere. And even now, I hear the situation is like it's super crowded, and there's very limited resources. So as of right now, I don't really know, but I can say that back then and also now, they prioritize families that have children, especially like women, like single moms with children. So where we had been staying was sort of near Bed-Stuy, and then our new place that they had moved us to that night was near like Prospect Park area. So it was both in Brooklyn, but kind of far. I stayed in the same school at this time, which was a school that was still like near Bed-Stuy. And it was just a commute that my mom had to do. And I didn't really notice there being any big differences in my life, in my school life, at least while I was young and just entering a shelter. Like I was missing out on much. Like I couldn't have play dates, but it was like I didn't have friends for that anyways. Even though my school life hadn't changed much, my home life did, because I went from living in a spacious 1-bedroom to living in this very tiny studio, only big enough for like a small table and chairs, a full-size bed, and then it had like a half kitchen. So we have like the small refrigerator, a hot plate, and a sink. And we were lucky enough to have our own private, like small bathroom, because I do know some shelters make you have communal bathrooms, which would have been much worse. But this shelter that we were in, it had like a mice infestation. And so there were pipes on the top of our ceilings, and we would have to like tie our food there every night to try to prevent the mice from eating it, or else they would destroy all of our food, and we already didn't have money. At the time, we were on food stamps and we got cash assistance. So to make that, like to put that into numbers, maybe it was like $200 a month for food. And then for cash, we only got, I don't know, like $70 every 2 weeks in cash. So we're not working with a lot of money here. And if mice are eating through our food, like what are we supposed to eat? Like what happens when we run out? Like we just starve. So the best we could do was buy very small amounts of food every single day, and whatever we did have, not keep it in the cabinets, but tie it to our ceiling. Anyways, we were in the shelter for 2 years, and it wasn't the best experience. The shelter wasn't very clean. There was just a lot of things happening, but I do remember making some really amazing friends, like my mom also. She made really good friends with other single moms there, and I made good friends with some of the children there. They had free tutoring, which I would have never been able to get otherwise because we couldn't afford it. And just trying to make the best out of that situation by making connections. And there was just a lot of family drama at the time going on because my mom had gone through it. Like her mom passed when I was 1, and then her husband passed, of course, when I was almost 7. So in such a small time, she went from 2 huge deaths, being a single mom, being homeless now. And so there was just a lot of turmoil, and I just felt kind of alone as a child, trying to figure out the world in this complex situation. But we were at that shelter for 2 years, and in those 2 years, I really learned the value of resources that New York City has, because my mom and I went from resource to resource to resource. Like we would get clothes, food, pantry. There were summer camps that would accept us because they were for kids who were in need. Just all the support that we could get. And we were there for 2 years, and we weren't able to find any place to move to. So they transferred us to a different shelter. Now this shelter was in Harlem, so no longer in Brooklyn. And then we made the move, which was against our will. Like we had no say. They just send you somewhere and they're like, that's where you're gonna live. And we were just like, okay, like what else are we supposed to do, right? So we move on probably like a 2-day notice. I swear, they give you no time. They're like, pack your stuff up and go. And again, we have like a shopping cart, and we move. And now we're in a walk up, another very small place, even smaller than the last. We get a bunk bed, like twin bunk beds for my mom and I. So at least now we no longer have to share the same bed, because we were sharing the same bed for those 2 years. And we go to this new shelter. And at least this one doesn't have a mice infestation, so that was a whole lot better. It was smaller, and I do end up changing schools for 4th grade there. And then I changed school again for 5th grade. Now, 5th grade, I make the biggest switch of my life, and I go from public school to private school. And I start going to the school at Columbia University, because the counselor at this new shelter found the opportunity that if you were to be accepted by lottery, that they would pay financial aid for you to go there. And I ended up getting accepted, and I did all the tests. They accepted me. I went in multiple times in grade 4, and I started grade 5 at Columbia University. And it was a big jump, because the educational level in grade 4 public school was not the educational level that was being taught in Columbia grade 5. So there was like a big gap, and my mom really couldn't help me because I don't come from a background where my parents have like college degrees or anything. So, and there was like no free tutoring. There's nothing free at Columbia. Like even after school programs that I wanted to join, I couldn't because they cost money that was way out of our range. At that time, I think my mom was paying $200 in tuition every semester or something like that. And even that, my mom could barely make that. Columbia University at that time, they didn't provide school lunch the way public school did. So oftentimes, like during the end of the month when there was no money left, I would go to school with no lunch, and my mom would call the nurse and she'd be like, hey, do you think that you could like get her something, just like something like small. And the nurse was really kind, and she was able to like, you know, bring me carrot sticks or like a little sandwich or something. But kids noticed. Kids noticed. And they weren't kind about it. And they wouldn't say it directly to my face. Instead, the kids in private, like in public school, they'll say it to your face. If they think you're fat and ugly, which they did, they would say it to my face. They thought I was poor and worthless, they would say it to my face. But in private school, no one says anything to your face. Instead, they exclude you, they give you looks, they make you feel like an alien a little bit. And that was painful, more painful than the public school bullying. And it just made me question like everything. And there were several times while I was in that school that I didn't have the proper clothes, like I didn't have winter shoes in the middle of winter. And the music teacher, if you're ever watching this, thank you so much, took me and had to buy me boots at Payless. And it was really embarrassing. And I remember like one day she complimented them when she saw me a few days later wearing them in class. She was like, "Oh, those are nice shoes, Judith," or something like that. And the kids made fun of them because they were Hannah Montana and being like, "What the hell? Like, why are you even?" And just like, you know, like they knew. And then there was also like a time where we did like penny harvest in public school for like poor kids, and the kids were like bringing in like bags of quarters. And that night, like my mom was like, "We don't have anything to eat." The night before, we barely had anything to eat, so I stole the bag of quarters for penny harvest. But you guys were donating to poor people anyway, and you had a child in that class who couldn't even afford food, so I took it. All right. And for so many years of my life, like especially my childhood, I felt so horrible for stealing that and then eventually like taking it home, and my mom and I spent it on food. I don't feel like I regret that now very much, but that was like another thing. Or just like teachers having to like support me financially, and it made me uncomfortable. And the whole situation just made me very uncomfortable. And kids at that time started having sleepovers, started hanging out, and I didn't want anybody to know that I was in a shelter. I was considered homeless, so I wouldn't say anything to anybody. I would just keep it to myself. They were having phones at that time in middle school, and I was nowhere near having a phone at that time. So it was a lot going on in terms of going from being around people who had a lot of money and then being homeless and poor. And I think private school really made that situation a lot worse. I was exposed to so many amazing organizations. I was able to go to sleepaway camp for free. My counselor at the time, I don't remember her name, but if she ever watches this too, thank you so much. But she knew that I like loved American Girl at that time. And she bought me my first American Girl doll, and I still have that doll. She means the world to me. And she like loved my mom and I. And she bought me that doll for Christmas, and it was so special. It still is special. Got a little emotional there, but there were just so many people who were kind to me and helped my family out, and worked at these organizations who made a huge difference in my life. And I feel like my mom and I wouldn't have been able to make it without them. The clothes on my back, the food, the support, the after school, the experiences. I remember the shelter got us once Broadway tickets to The Lion King, and that was like the most amazing thing I had ever experienced. And movie tickets, my first time at a movie was thanks to donations from like the shelter. And all my Christmas gifts, most Christmas that we were in the shelter, came from organizations, and they are who I have to thank and everything. So it was a really long 5 years that we were in the shelter, and I do remember there being really good community, really good support, and I wouldn't say that it was easy by any means. It was one of the most difficult times in my life, and I think my mom would very much attest to that, especially an experience like that after being a newly widowed woman. But through all that hardness, there were so many beautiful things that I'm grateful for. And at the end of those 5 years, the only place that we could find that ended up working out was NYCHA, so public housing. And we moved there after 5 years. And I remember so specifically going to see the apartment once it was finally ours, and there being 2 rooms and having a space of my own. I just remember that moment being full of gratitude and happiness and just relief that we had a place to call our own, that we were secure to stay at as long as we'd like. Such a hard experience, but then again, it was an experience who shaped who I am now, because after we moved out of the shelter, finally had our own place in high school, I got really involved in community service because of it. And even now, I work for a nonprofit. So the work I do today very much correlates with some of the things that mean something to me. And that's a huge, important part of the work that I do. To end off this video, all I have to say is, if you are feeling inspired and want to help, and you don't have the money to give, because right now the economy is in a place and we're all struggling. So my biggest thing is, if you want to help, just get out there, do some community service, and be kind to people, because you don't know what they're going through and their story. So that would be what I would love for you to take away from this video, and I'll see you in my next one.